Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Chasing Rabbits. My name is Scott Brown, and this is my vlog dedicated to helping you become the leader you wish you had had. I want you to think back to the relationships you've had in your life. How many of you have been in a relationship where the other person insisted on perfection? Perfection. Imagine what that would feel like if you were never able to make a mistake, if you were never able to do anything wrong, if everything had to go right 100% of the time. It would be a horrible relationship. And while I don't know anybody that has had that kind of a relationship privately or personally outside of a working environment, I know I have been in that type of a relationship in a working environment. I have worked for bosses who have demanded perfection. 100% right, 100% of the time. It was suffocating. It was toxic. It was demoralizing. It made me feel small and inadequate at all times. The perfection is the enemy of growth. When we're perfect, we cannot risk making a mistake. We cannot risk the opportunity to possibly fail forward in the pursuit of something better. Perfection keeps us stuck where we are. And I have worked for a number of bosses who have demanded perfection. Back in the mid-90s, I was an operations HR manager for Lazarus Department Stores in Pittsburgh. That's where I met some of you. And at Lazarus, our boss demanded perfection. And nowhere was it more evident or on brighter display than when we would have corporate visits. When our bosses' would show up at our store, especially during the holidays, and want to tour the store, the requirement, the expectation was that nothing would ever go wrong. What that meant is that for those of us working there, we're required to work 16 hours, 17 hours a day for 7, 8, 9 days to get ready for this 3-hour store tour to ensure that there was perfection. And inevitably, there wasn't perfection because we were dealing with the public. I remember the one visit, it was in December, and our boss's boss and his boss showed up at our store, announced visits, and they found one dust bunny on the floor under women's cashmere sweaters in December. The store was open. There were customers shopping. Amazingly, cashmere sweaters create lint. Lint collects into a dust bunny, but that one dust bunny, that was the worst thing that had happened to our boss in what felt like an eternity. The wrath that we felt for imperfection was horrendous. What he did by demanding perfection all the time was to create distance between who we were and who he was. There can never be a reciprocal relationship where we were willing to look out for him, knowing that he was going to make mistakes and we were going to help him grow. At the same point, there was never a relationship with us that he was going to look for us to help us grow. There was always a divide, a distance. There was never a connection. And because there was never a connection, there was never anything meaningful that happened. It was always the relationship between a boss and an employee, never the relationship between a leader and a follower. It was toxic and demoralizing, and it killed the business. There was one thing he could have done, though, one simple thing that he could have done to have changed everything. And it was just to say a couple of little words that we say in our life whenever we are in a relationship with somebody and they make a mistake, we make a mistake, we expect to hear a couple little words. And those are, I'm sorry. I'll do better. How can I help? I'm sorry breaks down that barrier that exists between you and somebody else when they demand perfection, because now all of a sudden you become human. And it can be vulnerable, it can be scary to risk not knowing everything. But guess what? The people who work for you, let me let you in on a little secret. They know you are not perfect. They've met you before. You've made mistakes. They know your mistakes. Whether you admit it to them or not is inconsequential. But if you're willing to say, I'm sorry, I'm willing to work on my flaws to get better, how can I help? And maybe even ask for their help in helping you grow. Imagine how much better you could become, how much better they could become if the relationship evolved from boss and employee to leader and follower. Connections matter. Relationships are the foundation of everything that we do in the world. Without relationships, we're out there by ourselves, unprotected from the environment, and someone is going to get the better of us. We wouldn't have evolved this far without someone in our tribe looking out for us. Don't let yourself fall prey to the beast of perfection because you can't admit that you're not perfect. Everyone knows you're not perfect. The only one you're fooling is yourself. Allow yourself those moments to say, I'm sorry, when you make a mistake. Allow those moments to say, how can I help, when you realize you've done something wrong. Relationships matter. Reciprocal relationships move mountains. But if you're not willing to bridge that divide, you'll never find out. I talk a lot about some former bosses because those were relationships that were never corrected and never mended. And I still consider it to be some of the most toxic relationships that I've ever experienced. I want you, as a leader, to know how to bridge that gap. So when someone looks back on you down the road, they're looking at you as somebody who made a difference in their life in a positive way, not as someone who left one dust bunny on the floor during a corporate visit in December and treated you like a subpar human. That's never the legacy that you want. But it's in your hands. So say you're sorry, build relationships, stop trying to be perfect, and be human instead. Until tomorrow, build those connections that you have with the folks that mean the most in your life, and you'll find that you go much farther and further than you could have ever imagined. Until tomorrow, my friends, toast on. It's been a pleasure. Have a wonderful night. Be well.